Welcome to the National Press Club, the place where news happens. I'm Elisa Parenti, current treasurer here at the National Press Club and your incoming vice president for 25. I am a breaking news editor for my day job at Bloomberg News, which is what held me up a little bit. Senator Murkowski making some news on her feelings about Defense Secretary nominee Pete Hegseth. So that kept me in the office a few minutes longer, and I apologize for keeping everyone here waiting. We are joined, of course, at this remarkable Headliners event by Robert Rand, the journalist whose book, The Menendez Brothers, revealed new evidence in the murder case against Lyle and Erik Menendez. He'll do the Vanna White. And Anamaria Baralt, a cousin of the brothers and a vocal advocate for their release. We are happy to accept questions from the audience and will take as many as time permits. If you'd like to submit a question, please email headliners@press.org. That's headliners, HEADLINERS @press.org, or write your questions on the cards at the seat and pass them to Madison. Is Madison here? Or just if you just raise your hand with the card in it, we'll get somebody to grab your question. On July 2nd, 1996, a Los Angeles judge sentenced brothers Lyle and Erik Menendez to life in prison without the possibility of parole in the murders in 1989 of their parents, José and Kitty Menendez, as they watched a movie in their Beverly Hills home. In the first of the brothers' two trials, their defense attorneys argued that the brothers acted in self-defense after years of sexual, emotional, and physical abuse by their father, while the prosecution depicted the brothers as greedy, ungrateful children who plotted their parents' murder out of hatred. The trials riveted the nation and have inspired countless books, documentaries, and movies, including a recent Netflix series, and the brothers have disavowed that one as dishonest. Now a judge will hear new evidence, and I'm sure many of you, as I have been riveted by this case, have been following the circumstances around the case. We'll have a resentencing hearing. It's now scheduled for March 20th and 21st. While newly elected Los Angeles County District Attorney Nathan, is it Hochman or Hochman? Hochman, okay, has met with the Menendez brothers' relatives and committed to reviewing the facts in the case. He has not decided whether to support the brothers' bid for a resentencing that would make them eligible for parole after decades behind bars. Our guests today, Robert Rand and Anamaria Baralt, know the case imminently and intimately. And Mr. Rand, as you're probably aware, is an Emmy award-winning journalist. He began covering the case from the Miami Herald the day after the killings back in 1989. So he has really followed this all the way up to and including a conversation he had with Lyle literally within 7 days ago. So you're very much closely associated with everything, and family is family, and we have the brother's cousin with us here today. So amazing, and I'm so grateful for you to take the time to share your insights with us here. I guess what we should start is maybe if we just have a welcome for your safe travels here. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it. I wanted to start, maybe, Robert, you could tell us a little bit about all those years ago when, way back when, the circumstances around which you came to become familiar with the case and cover it right from the beginning.
So the morning after the killing of José and Kitty Menendez, I received a phone call in the newsroom at the Miami Herald that a high-profile home video executive and his wife had been killed the previous night in Beverly Hills. And the friend who called me was the editor of a trade magazine for the home video business, and Stephen Apple, and he told me about José and Kitty. And José was Cuban-American, which made it a potential interest to people in Miami. And there were 7 months between the crime and the arrest of Erik and Lyle Menendez. And so I was sent out to California, not to write a story about the murder investigation, but to write a story from the Sunday magazine about the José Menendez and his rags to riches immigrant saga ends in a terrible tragedy. And so that's how I met Erik and Lyle 2 months after the killings, 5 months before they were arrested. They weren't suspects publicly. I had no reason to be suspicious of them. And so I was literally in on the ground floor of the story.
Wow, and it's been remarkable, and I imagine just following the case and getting somewhat close with the subjects of the case through the years, and anxious to hear about the developments. You continue to break news on this case, not the least of which was, in those of you familiar with the 2018 edition of the book, the letter that Erik wrote to his cousin Andy, in which he talked about the situation with his father and with Jose. So really remarkable piece there. Anamaria, tell us about, so you even earlier,
Sure.
your experiences with the brothers as their cousin. What are perhaps some fond memories you have growing up, and what was the family like? What were they like?
They were fun. I have so many good memories with Lyle and Erik. I mean, when I think about our childhoods together, we had a pool in at my parents' house, and spending hours and hours playing Marco Polo. We canoed at the lake behind their house. We climbed a million trees, who knows how many. And it was just, they were fun. They were full of life. They were kind. They were fun.
How have you, it's remarkable the number of relatives who are in support and advocating, like yourself, for their release. There are those that have held out, Kitty's brother among them, some family members who are opposed to.
So there's one, Kitty's brother.
Okay,
So
yes.
Sometimes it's falsely put out there that, some family members are for, some family members are against. Dozens are for.
Literally everyone.
One.
But one.
Is against Kitty's brother, Milton.
What are some of the reasons, what is the thinking behind the belief that it is time that they've served their debt to society and should be released? What is where does that feeling come from? From the family's perspective.
Several things. One is that they have expressed remorse. Lyle and Erik are sorry. They have expressed to us their remorse. They have felt that deep shame and remorse for their actions. They have asked for forgiveness. We have given them that forgiveness. And then we have been able to witness their growth. So those of us who are in close contact of them, they are not the 18 and 21-year-olds who committed this offense. They are really kind, middle-aged men at 54 and 57 that have made great strides. They have educated themselves. They have created programs. We have witnessed their growth. So for us, it's time. It's time. There's no purpose to keeping them in continued incarceration.
And Robert, maybe get us up to speed on what we're anticipating for the resentencing hearing that's going to be coming up in a couple of months. What's kind of the legal parameters there?
So there are two parallel tracks that the Menendez brothers have right now. One is the resentencing initiative that was filed by former DA George Gascon, who has just lost his re-election bid to Nathan Hochman. And the other is a habeas corpus petition that was filed in May of 2023, one day after a documentary I executive produced, Menendez plus Menudo, Boys Betrayed, came out on Peacock. And that documentary revealed new evidence that, that had never been heard before in the Menendez case. And so the resentencing only deals with Erik and Lyle's time in the state prison system and their rehabilitation. The habeas petition deals with the new evidence and whether or not it would have made a difference at the time that they were on trial in the 1990s.
How is the Lyle Menendez that you spoke with last weekend different from the one that you met 35 years ago?
Well, they're very different people. They were immature 18 and 21-year-old college kids when I met them. Now they're grown men. They're middle-aged men. And they've spent more than half their lives incarcerated. And they have really become really valuable members of their inmate community, and they're involved in a number of different programs trying to help their inmate community. And one of the most interesting lines that George Gascon said at the end of October, the former LA County DA, when he announced that he wanted to start an initiative to have them resentenced. He said, Erik and Lyle Menendez never thought that they were going to get out of prison. They were sentenced to life without parole in 1996, and so they never thought they had any chance of ever getting out. And yet they chose a path of redemption, a path of trying to help other people, a life of trying to be of service to others in their inmate community. And I think that's really important to understand, and something that I believe that if they are let out of prison, that they will continue doing that work and they will be of service to people.
We have a question for you as to how and when did you find understanding and forgiveness to your cousin's actions? And in hindsight, were there any signs as to what was happening in the family?
How and when did I forgive them? Immediately. I never didn't, there wasn't a moment where I wasn't in full forgiveness of them. I love them very much, so.
And we should say that, so Jose's sister Terry was your
my
mom?
Mother.
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
So Jose and Kitty were my aunt and uncle.
Okay.
Yeah, who I did grow up with and who I loved very much. At the same time, I also was very, very close to Lyle and Erik. So that wasn't a question. There certainly was a period of time where I didn't know that they did it, right? That they said that they didn't do it. And I believed them because it was so out of character, because these were not violent people. They were kind and warm and loving their whole lives. So that was a huge shock to find out. I wasn't mad. I was still very supportive at the time. We know there wasn't, there are moments now as an adult that I look back on that haunt me a little, and I won't share what those are. I gotta protect my own mental health, so I don't often talk about it in detail like that. But at the time, no, that was a surprise.
I understand. And Robert, we have a question about the Menudo, that element of it. And again, it's just, as a journalist, it's just remarkable the way you were able to get little bits and pieces. And that's another whole session. Would love to do a deep dive on that front, but maybe talk about that element of it and about the latest developments. What precipitated the update to your book that came out in September of 24?
Well, actually, I knew something about the Menudo story 30 years ago. I started hearing rumors when I covered both trials every day for 6 months long, each trial. And I started hearing rumors before the first trial about there was some type of nefarious connection between Jose Menendez when he was head of RCA Records and the Latin boy band Menudo. And actually, the first person who brought it to my attention was a man named John Peduto, who had been Jose's personal assistant at Hertz Rent-A-Car and RCA Records. And every time I spoke with Mr. Peduto in the spring of '93, he kept bringing up that Jose was obsessed with Menudo and the singer Ricky Martin. And the first 2 or 3 times it just went by me. And when he brought up the 3rd, 4th, and 5th calls, I started thinking, okay, I need to check into this. And so that actually led me to do an interview with Ricky Martin in December of '93 in the closing days of the first Menendez trial. And I've never revealed what Ricky told me that day. He asked me to keep everything off the record. I hope that someday that he might consider going public with his story. But I always knew there was something there, and so I went to Puerto Rico in the 1990s and 2000s, and I made a number of reporting trips. I spoke to former members of the band, but everybody was off the record. The people who did talk to me on the record were journalists and other people close to the band. And so I knew this was a story. I knew there were potential victims out there, and I just stuck with it. And in the fall of 2020, Amazon released a scripted series on the history of Menudo. that was produced by Edgardo Diaz, who was the creator of the band and the manager of the band. And suddenly, several members of, former members of Menudo started appearing in Spanish language media and saying that's not the real story of Menudo. But they wouldn't say, nobody would say that something happened to them. But I knew that was my opportunity to reopen the investigation. And I worked with my reporting partner in Miami, Neri Inclán, and we were able to find Roy Rosello.
I see. And Anamaria, what would you say about your memories of Jose? I mean, he certainly comes across as a larger-than-life character.
That's a good way to put it.
Of course, nobody's, we're, hopefully I think everybody sees that, no one is just all one way or the other, that we exist in a spectrum, I believe. And I'm just curious.
I believe that's an accurate statement.
Your thoughts on Jose at this point?
He was intense. He was a little scary. He was big and imposing, for sure. Yeah.
What was it like, the dynamic that Jose had with his sisters, with your mom and
he was
your
very
Aunt
close
Marta?
to my mother, and my father was his best friend, which was a pretty fascinating dynamic because my father was a polar opposite in personality, in every possible way to Jose. He was kind and gentle and sweet, and so it was very interesting that those two were so close, but they were very close to our family.
Do you have an opportunity to see Kyle and Erik these days? I mean, are you able to?
I talk to them every day.
Oh,
I
really?
saw Lyle 2 weeks ago. For
Okay,
his
so
birthday, yeah.
maybe give us what is their mindset as they approach these months? I mean, this has got to be just momentous.
Yes, I think that they are cautiously hopeful. Hope is a dangerous game when you are an incarcerated individual facing life without parole. So, and that has been their reality for decades now. They are feeling the love and the support globally that the people have been giving them, and so they are cautiously hopeful, but I think that they are also very reasonable. I mean, if you were to talk to them, people would be surprised at just how measured they are as people, right? They have enormous perspective on life, and so they take this, they welcome this process, but at the same time they're a little bit tamped down. Yeah.
One of the most difficult pieces of the punishment to me, it seems to be, would be the fact that they were kept apart for so many years. Mm-hmm. What has it been for them to be incarcerated closer together? And has that facilitated kind of some reconciliation in their, just in terms of coming to terms with each other and their lives?
They're very close. They've always been very close. Yeah, so I think that it's been a beautiful experience for them.
And the LA County Probation Department recommended that they be placed in the same facility. At the last minute of the morning before the sentencing, the Beverly Hills Police filed a motion asking that they be placed in separate prisons because they co-conspired in a crime, and if they were in the same prison, they might co-conspire to commit a new crime. And that's just ridiculous. It was really one last chance for the Beverly Hills Police to be cruel to Erik and Lyle Menendez. And they didn't see each other for nearly 22 years. And that's wrong. And they've been reunited since April 2018. And they're both very happy to be back together.
Robert, here's a question for you. If and when Erik and Lyle are released, will you still continue to fight for the other Menudo members who have yet to come forward?
Absolutely. I believe that there's more story to be revealed about Menudo. I know there is. My reporting partner, Neri, and I have spoken to other Menudo members. We understand why people don't want to come forward because they're now in their late 40s and 50s. They have families, they have kids. There are some former Menudo members that are still making money going on reunion tours, and we were very close to having other people be on the record, and they chose to not talk I hope that more people will come forward in the future.
We mentioned the Netflix documentary. I know there's been a couple of them.
Right.
The look on your face speaks volumes. So the question from the audience member is, was the Netflix Menendez Brothers documentary accurate? I'll just put it right to you.
Overall, it was accurate. I actually was interviewed in the Netflix documentary. It was a decent job at presenting the OG Menendez story, but strangely enough, they did not include the new evidence in that documentary. So that was odd for a documentary that came out in October of 24, but I thought it was very well done.
Okay, and what about, there was a scripted, I use the word live action, which is not the right phrase, but you know what I mean?
Scripted series.
Scripted series.
Called Monsters that
Yes.
Legendary producer Ryan Murphy came out with in September of 24. And the problem with Monsters was that it was full of falsehoods and inaccurate factual things. And what I believe is that people really don't know the difference between documentaries and scripted series. So when you see real life characters in a scripted series, a lot of people think, oh, that's the truth. That really happened. And I won't go into all the details, but there are a number of scenes that are totally false in Monsters.
Thank you for that. Should the brothers be set free, what will they do afterwards? Have you talked about this? Is that something that you...
Yes, for sure. They're both very excited to have the opportunity to take the work that they have started behind bars out into the world. They're both so passionate about advocating for survivors of sexual abuse, for getting their message out, for hopefully changing policy and even working within the legal system. Erik has done so much work with his fellow incarcerated people with trauma-related meditation and 12-step programs. Lyle has designed the Green Space program, which is redesigning the prison yard where he is. He'd like to take those kinds of programs and further expand them to other prison yards in their efforts to help reduce recidivism. It's really, they can do a lot of good.
Well said. So here's another question for you, Robert. Did the DA's office hear the rumors that you mentioned about the band and José Menendez at the time of the trial? Did the office investigate those rumors? Do you know or think there are more members? So you've indicated you do believe that there are.
I do believe it. And a further answer to that question is the Beverly Hills Police actually called one person in June of '93, just before the first trial, a former promoter who'd worked with Menudo, and they said, by the way, can you say anything good about José Menendez? Or can anybody that you know, a former Menudo member, come forward? And the promoter said, no. And that was the whole investigation. One phone call.
One phone call, okay. Let me ask you, I'm going to put him devil's advocate because I am here with other journalists and I don't want to be seen as being, you know, too soft. Although I do feel like I'm getting softer in my old age. But
we all are.
If I were to play devil's advocate, and again, to preface this, you know, with the caveat that I appreciate what it is, what is the stakes of what the brothers encountered and their lives, and I don't in any way mean to take away from that. That said, what about the concerns of those who argue, not the least of which is the one prosecutor, the woman prosecutor, who said, hey, you know, they were adults. They were not, you know, they were old enough to drive away, to extract themselves from that situation. They could have taken other actions rather than killing their parents. What do you say to those who say if these brothers are released, what would stop similar cases from, you know, from this kind of similar outcomes, and kind of how could we just be a society in which it's just the justice is meted out that way?
I think that the number 1 and 2 questions I'm always asked Number one is they were 18 and 21 nationally ranked tennis players. Why didn't they just walk out the front door? Number two question I'm asked is, okay, maybe their father was a monster. Maybe he was a bad person. But what about their mother? Because we believe that all mothers are loving and nurturing. So the answer to question number one, why didn't they walk out the front door? I've spoken to a number of therapy experts over the years, and they've explained to me that it was like Erik and Lyle were living in a tunnel. They couldn't imagine life without their parents. Their parents had made them totally dependent on them. For example, they did their homework for the brothers, and it didn't take teachers long to realize the homework was always pristine, and then they'd take quizzes in class and fail. And the number two question is, what about their mother? And there was a line that Leslie Amerson had in her closing argument at the first trial, which was that José and Kitty Menendez ran boot camp Beverly Hills, and Kitty was one of the guards, not one of the prisoners.
I think we have to understand, we have to look at those questions with the lens of what we know today as far as PTSD and how people react after years of abuse, right? Their brains were altered as a result of those years. And so they made choices that you and I maybe sitting here wouldn't make, right? We know now, we understand now the science behind trauma and how it affects actions.
And I think, too, it's interesting to think about, I think about myself when I saw in one of the documentaries, it talked about the SNL skit with Will Ferrell, and how the reaction, one of the things that the prosecution did during the first trial was kind of made the case that this was all an act, in that it was just, and I think that people, speaking, I guess I should just speak for myself. At that time in my life, at that age, I just was not as attuned to child sex abuse as you are today, and aware of what it really means, and of young boys being victimized. So I certainly can appreciate that.
I think that society was very different 30 years ago when Erik and Lyle Menendez went on trial the first time. There was no internet, there was no social media. So in high-profile cases, the mainstream media would set a log line, a summary of what the story was. And the story about Erik and Lyle was two greedy rich kids killed Ozzie and Harriet on a Sunday night in Beverly Hills. And that was never the real story.
Robert, with regard to TikTok and all that has happened in this case, am I going to walk out of here being more of a proponent of social media? Could this actually happen? Can you speak to that? I mean, it's
Sure.
a very interesting perspective.
In the fall of 2020, my son, who was 14 years old at the time, came to me one afternoon and he said, "Dad, TikTok is full of Menendez Brothers videos." And I laughed. And then I went down the rabbit hole for the next 3 hours. And I saw this building over a period of months. And I called up a friend of mine who was a senior editor at the New York Times. And I said, "I think this is a story." And they did do a story in February 21 about the new social media supporters for Erik and Lyle Menendez. And that set off some TV shows. And that really was the appetizer for what's happening right now, that there is now a huge community, and more than half of the supporters of Erik and Lyle Menendez are outside of the U.S. So it's not just an American thing, but it's all over the world. And many of them are also abuse survivors themselves.
That's really remarkable. Here's another question from the crowd. What will the family do if the DA's office continues to delay the resentencing hearing? And the second question is, can the brothers demand to be released together at the same time?
Well, the first question I want to address, that the latest delay for the resentencing hearings is as a result of the fires in Los Angeles. They are hugely empathetic of what is happening. We are hugely empathetic of what is happening to the people in Los Angeles and all of the thousands of people whose lives have been upended. So Erik and Lyle are keenly aware of what is happening, and nobody is suggesting that this latest delay was anything other than related to the fires, and the priority is, of course, to keep Los Angelinos safe. So I want to say that. As far as them making demands to be released together, I don't know that that's in the realm of possibility. They will, if the judge decides to go with the original sentencing recommendation from the past DA, from Gascon, they will both, brothers will have to go to separate parole hearings and will be judged separately. So maybe they will be released around the same time, maybe they won't.
To piggyback on that, this is from a different person. It says, how do you stay hopeful when so much happens around the case that constantly seems to be pushing it back?
It can be tough sometimes. However, remember that 2 years ago, there was no hope. There was life without parole. That was it. We were facing the rest of our lives with them behind bars. So now there is hope. And yes, it does seem in this, with the Menendez case, that there seems to be a constant flurry of extraordinary circumstances, let's call it that. But we have hope, and I have hope, and I have great faith that if the latest DA, if District Attorney Hochman does what he says he's going to do, which is take a deep dive and review everything and treat the case with attention as an individual case and not a blanket situation, then he will come to the obvious conclusion, which is that they deserve to be resentenced.
What do you think about the world today will be the hardest for the brothers to adjust to when they are released? I'll give you a chance on this one, Robert. Or both of you, actually.
I think that Erik and Lyle Menendez have both become remarkable men. They're very different, as I said, than the young guys I met at the age of 18 and 21. I believe they'll be an asset to any community they choose to live in, and I think they will devote their lives to helping other abuse survivors.
I worry they have not lived in the age of social media, nor were they celebrities before. So that comes with a lot of attention. Sometimes it's wanted, sometimes it's not, and I worry about that. I hope that people will let them live private lives and let them do the good work that they've started.
I want to give each of you an opportunity to freewheel a little bit and talk about what would you like to most communicate to everyone here today that might be missed or might not have been out in the mainstream media or the documentaries, or what is the one piece that you'd like folks to walk away with the knowledge of?
Going back to what I was saying about the media was so different 30 years ago, and Erik and Lyle were being portrayed as a pair of greedy rich kids. That was never the case. They were from a wealthy upper class family. They had always spent a lot of money. And in August of '92, the LA County DA's office went to a grand jury with evidence of murder for financial gain. And they presented that evidence over the course of a week, and the grand jury did not indict the brothers on those charges. And yet, the DA's office knew that the media loved that story. Greedy rich kids kill Ate and Harriet, and that was never the real story. And even though they didn't get an indictment on those charges, they continued to push that story because they knew the media liked it. And so I think that's one of the biggest myths of the Menendez case, is that they did this for the money. That was not the case.
I hope that they get seen as the people that they are today. So much of the media coverage, even today, you'll see the pictures are from when they were kids, the 18 or 21, or during the trials when they were in their 20s. There is the constant reliving of the offense, of the crime, of the days before, of the weeks after. There isn't enough attention on the men that they are today and how they have spent the time in their lives and the differences that they have made, including developing programs aimed at helping the most vulnerable people around them. I would like the world to know them as the men that they are today, because it is really stunning.
Thank you. If anybody has any additional questions, please write them out and hand them over to Cecily, and we can ask. Let me ask you both, what is next? I know obviously March 20th and 21, that's right on your radar. What kind of, it's hard to think outside of that, I suppose, but if you do, what kind of, when you think, 2 years down the road, not just as it pertains to the brothers, in your case, Robert, what other projects are coming down the pike, and what other kind of ways are you thinking of impacting change?
Are you speaking about the Menendez case or in general?
You just in both, actually. Yeah, in general, I was thinking if there are any other projects.
Well, I'm actually working on a new book, totally unrelated to the Menendez case. Good story. Can't tell you yet. I will in the future. Stay tuned. But what's important about Erik and Lyle Menendez is that this case needs to end. They need to be sent home to their family. They've been in jail for long enough. We really need to examine what is the theory, what is the purpose of sending people to prison? Do we want to lock people away and never let them out? Or do we want to see if they can be rehabilitated and reintegrated in society? And I think Erik and Lyle Menendez are the poster guys for people who have changed their lives and should be allowed out.
And did I read correctly that is part of the consideration that this resentencing, the part of what they're looking at is, has rehabilitation occurred? Is that?
Yes. Basically, the simple way to look at the parallel tracks, the resentencing only deals with their life since they entered the California prison system, and whether or not they have become rehabilitated. The habeas corpus petition deals with the new evidence, and we'll go back and re-examine whether that evidence could have made a difference at the time that they were on trial in the 1990s.
Okay.
Yeah.
And let me ask you, what do you see, 2 years out from now?
Hopefully I'll have Lyle and Erik out. Yeah, so let's hope for that. Something about Team TikTok over here. Yeah. Something that has been so amazing has been not just the support for Lyle and Erik, but the number of people who have chosen to reach out to me with their own stories of sexual abuse in their lives, men and women. And the men in particular are so passionate about this advocacy because they will tell me, like, I feel like you're fighting for me. Nobody believed me. And that has been very heartwarming. So I would, not just heartwarming, but just powerful, personally powerful in my life. And that is something I want to lean into, is continuing advocacy for the survivors of sexual abuse and hoping to give them a broader platform. Yeah.
And one interesting factoid was that when Lyle Menendez testified in the first trial, every day he was on the witness stand, he carried a letter in his pocket from an abuse survivor. And so he's been, the majority of their mail back then was from people that said, nobody believed me when I was a kid and I was trying to, complain about what was going on.
Well, I have to tell you, when I read the letter that Erik wrote to Andy in your book now, how many years ago? I don't do math, but
right.
I think 2018 was a while ago, and it was so chilling to just think about a young person writing that, and just the fact that it was a letter that was written. It wasn't a text. It was actual. They were writing letters. When you came across that and saw that and looked at that letter, what was that like for you as a journalist?
That was a smoking gun moment for me. When I saw that letter, I said, whoa, this is a very important potentially very important piece of evidence in the case.
And to be clear, let me interrupt to say that that letter was written several months prior to the actual.
9 months prior.
9 months prior, okay.
And actually, I'd like to read a couple
That would be great,
paragraphs,
yes.
if you don't mind.
Thank you. I may have it bookmarked right here.
These are 2 paragraphs from the letter that Erik Menendez wrote to his cousin, Andy Cano, in late 1988. It starts out, "Mom isn't doing too good. It's like she's here physically, but mentally she's just like gone, if you know what I mean. She freaks out over nothing. I feel bad for her. I don't know why she puts up with Dad's shit. At times, I wish I could talk to her about things, you know? Someday, especially Dad and I. But the way she worships him and tells him everything, I'm so afraid she'll tell him whatever I say. I just can't risk it." And then the next paragraph in the letter goes, "I've been trying to avoid Dad. It's still happening, Andy, but it's worse for me now. I can't explain it. He's so overweight that I can't stand to see him. I never know when it's going to happen, and it's driving me crazy. Every night I stay up thinking he might come in. I need to put it out of my mind. I know what you said before, but I'm afraid. You just don't know Dad like I do. He's crazy. He warned me 100 times about telling anyone, especially Lyle. Am I a serious wimpus? I don't know if I'll make it through this. I can handle it, Andy. I need to stop thinking about this."
We should be noted that Andy was called a liar when he was testifying in his early 20s about knowledge, you know, and then struggled with addiction, and ultimately we lost him in 2003.
That is very powerful, and I'm struck by the word wimpus, because it just takes you back to that time. It takes me back to that time. I'm about the same age as the brothers are, so, I have to say, I cannot thank each of you enough for sharing your story, sharing your time, coming here, and telling all of us about your experiences. And I recognize how particularly hard that's got to be, and will continue to be. And so, thank you for that. Okay. Oh, I think we've still. Yeah, we're good. We've got time for a few more. To Robert, how did you gain the trust of Lyle after his own account of not trusting you when he spoke to Norma Novelli? Oh, this is a really good, whoever gave this question, see, well, let's trade spots. You should be up here. This is a great question. Excellent.
Well,
exactly.
Let me tell you a few things about Norma Novelli. Norma Novelli was somebody who Lyle met. She published a newsletter that was circulated in prison called Mind's Eye, and Lyle Menendez wrote her a letter about an article she had written, and she became a very close friend of his. And each of the brothers had friends who were acting as switchboard operators. The brothers would call each of their friends at night, and then the switchboard operators would make three-way calls to whoever they wanted to talk to. And so for several years, Norma Novelli was, pretending that she was a good friend of Lyle's, and she was surreptitiously recording all of his phone calls, and those were calls being illegally recorded because California is a two-party state, like most states. And Norma Novelli actually put out a so-called book in 1995, and the book was not a book. It was simply a series of transcripts of phone calls. And when the book, quotes are on it, was released, the promotion said, these are the tapes that will put Lyle Menendez away. And everything you need to know about the tapes is the tapes were never admitted as evidence in the second trial. And Nora Novelli, showed the true meaning of her friendship, which was, doing this horrible thing where she released these transcripts. And I believe that Norma may have actually had a crush on Lyle, which was strange because she was 54 and he was 25 at the time. And I just wish she would go away.
And how were you able to flip that with Lyle and say, hey, I'm not,
Well,
she and I are two different people?
In one of her transcripts, Lyle was saying something about me that was negative, and that was one phone call that he had. I've known him for 35 years, as well as Erik, and like any relationship, over a period of decades, you go in and out of different periods. But I wholeheartedly support them, and I believe I know as much as the lawyers. I probably know maybe even more. But Lyle's a great guy, Erik's a great guy, and as Anamaria was talking about earlier, they are not the cartoon characters that you see portrayed in Saturday Night Live sketches. They are real people to us, and we know the difference between who they are portrayed as and who they really are.
I appreciate that. This one's for you, and I've been calling you Anamaria. Is it Anna or Anna?
Anna.
It is Anna. Okay, thank you. I got a bum steer on that. I apologize.
Okay.
Anamaria, your mother's testimony in the penalty phase of the trial was very moving. Has your family ever discussed their interactions with the prosecution, particularly in regards to the death penalty?
Well, my mother has nothing nice to say about them. Yes. And if you know her, you know that she has no qualms in expressing herself that way as well. Obviously she never wanted that. She always supported them. She loves them desperately. That is her greatest wish, is to see them released.
And it's unfortunate that we didn't have a camera in the courtroom at the second trial, including the penalty phase, because Anamaria's mother, Terry, was an incredibly powerful witness, standing up to Prosecutor David Kahn, who was a very arrogant person. And Terry Baralt said, we've had enough killing in this family. We don't want anything to happen to Erik and Lyle.
Yeah, the way they spoke to her was terrible. So disrespectful for a woman who had already lost family.
It seems, that I can see that. I can imagine feeling just almost like victimized all over again, to a certain extent. Yeah. Okay, well, with that, thank you. And one last opportunity for any additional points. We can't get you to break some news with what's coming, your next project, no? Okay.
Not today.
Not today.
But I will say that this updated edition of my book came out in September. I hope to release another updated edition when Erik and Lyle Menendez are free men, because that's what should be the final chapter of this story.
Wow. Well, that's certainly something to look forward to. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I do want to say that I hope that from the family's perspective, we are really hoping that the judge will make his way to immediate release with manslaughter, as opposed to the current recommendation that is for just to take away the without parole and send them to the parole board. You just mentioned how my mother was traumatized again with that with that situation, with the penalty phase. This has been 35 years of trauma for this family. 35 years. It's enough. 35 years is enough. It's more than any family should have to go through. My mother has suffered more than any woman should have to in her life. Same with Aunt Joan on the other side, Joan Anderson. So the sooner we can get this done, the happier that we will all be as a family. We were desperately seeking closure. So that is really our message.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I've got a few announcements. Before we conclude, I do want to take a moment to thank our headliners, team co-leaders, Donna Lewan Leger, Lori Russo, Jen Judson, our club program manager, Cecily Martin, Scott Martin, and club executive director, Didier Sagi. Thanks also to our guests, Robert Rand and Anna Marie, for sharing their insights with us. We hope that you'll accept these much coveted National Press Club mugs as tokens of our appreciation for you being here today. Right. Thank you. Pack those up and bring them back with you, back out west. Finally, we want to thank all of you who've taken time to be with us today, our audience. We hope you'll join us tomorrow for a conversation with former CBS News correspondent Marvin Kalb, who will discuss his new book, A Different Russia, Khrushchev and Kennedy on a Collision Course, at a virtual headliners book event at 2:30 p.m. That event will be broadcast live stream on the National Press Club's website. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And also, is it possible for you to sign some books? If anybody, if you're interested, you can grab some signatures.